Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be talking about dynasty moves to make for rebuilding teams. If you haven't done so already, check out our most recent episode if you're a win now team, because we did the same thing for contenders.
Hike!
All right, Joe, so why don't you start us off? Who do you got as your first rebuild trade target?
Yeah, my first rebuild trade target is going to be running back Kendry Miller. And, this guy had a pretty disappointing rookie season with the injuries. Didn't end up with a lot of opportunities once he was healthy. He had 41 carries, 156 yards. Then ended up scoring, had 10 receptions for 117 yards as well. But, Alvin Kamara is not getting any younger. He's at 29 years old. I think he does play maybe this year with the Saints. It's tough to say what's going to happen in 2025. But then they also have Jamal Williams there, who Kendry Miller just couldn't seem to pass last year, but I think because of the injury. So I truly think Kendry Miller steps up. He's going to be the RB2 behind Alvin Kamara this year. And I think the Saints, as long as he's healthy, will want to get him involved. They didn't really add anyone else to the running back room for agency-wise, draft-wise either. So I think Kendry Miller's in a prime spot here. Disappointing rookie season. Owner might be looking to move off him. You add him, and I think he's going to, get a lot more utilization as long as he's able to be healthy.
Yeah, it's interesting. Jamal Williams is 29 years old. I was looking at his contract to see if there was any sort of out at all in the contract. Fortunately, it doesn't look like it.
I did the same thing earlier. It didn't really look like it, but that's what I'm confident that Kendry Miller, with his talent, this is the guy that I was really excited about coming out of, TCU in college. Wish he didn't have the injury-riddled season last year as a rookie because I just wanted to be able to see him play. But I think with his talent and everything, I'm not afraid of Jamal Williams being there. I think, when he's healthy, this guy easily clears him to be the RB2 on the roster.
It's kind of an oddball backfield because, like you mentioned, you got Kamara, who has been productive over the past several years for them. He has 1 year left in his contract. Jamal Williams has got 2, but then they drafted Kendry Miller decently high. So I don't know. It's kind of an interesting mix that they got here. I think he's the guy I'm interested in as well. And looking at trade value chart, Joe, I mean, he actually is a little bit higher than I anticipated.
He was higher than I expected as well, with the draft charts, trade value chart that we're using here. I was kind of honestly for how disappointing he was his rookie year with the injury. But I guess, like me, just they like his outlook, once he's healthy in the Saints backfield for the future.
So I'm assuming you would trade a guy like Aaron Jones, James Conner, maybe even like a Kamara for Kendry Miller?
Yeah, I'd definitely be willing to do that. I mean, especially we're talking about rebuilds. What good does a aging running back like Aaron Jones or Alvin Kamara? Like I said, he's 29, going to be 30 in 2025. You're looking to rebuild. You want some young talent. Running backs can be hard to come by. So if you can, snag a guy like Kendry Miller who could be productive this year and then, even more productive in the future.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, any of those guys. I mean, maybe, Henry, we mentioned Henry's maybe an anomaly because he's still playing at a high level, even though he's so old. He's a different type of running back. But I would say Jones for sure, as well as possibly Kamara. I think both those guys could be done after next year. Even Eckler could be done after next year. I don't think they have much longer in the tank. Yeah,
and I mean, Kendry Miller's turning 22 next month. So, I mean, you're talking about a young back that, didn't have much of an NFL workload last year. So there's room for him to, produce and plenty of room for him to get some carries.
Not to mention, too, I think it's something to consider, right? I mean, it's hard, right? You're trading a guy like Aaron Jones, who's a productive player. You're going to get a guy like Kendry Miller. You could be like, man, like there's no guarantee Kendry Miller does anything. But if you're rebuilding, don't straddle the fence. If you're not going to win a championship, there's no reason to be in limbo. If you end up getting worse, hey, you got to. As long as you had your rookie pick, you got a better rookie pick. And next year's running back class looks to be much better than this past one. So just because even if Kenny Miller does work doesn't mean that you can't benefit. Because you could be a worse team and end up having a better pick.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that's a good point, Steve, about the rebuild. Like, there's some guys in our league that just say they like to ride the middle and want to be competitive. I'm not that, man. If I'm not gonna be in it, I just want to completely tear everything down, go all in on the rebuild, or I'm pushing all of my chips in for a championship. I think I got a chance to compete. So don't be afraid to tear some things down and go bare bones and rebuild your team. And hopefully you can be competing for a championship, 2 to 3 years down the road.
Yeah, I feel similar to you as well on that. Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, show some support by subscribing to our YouTube channel and following us on Spotify and Apple. We have episodes all throughout the year, so you're not going to miss what we have in store. So my first Dynasty trade target for rebuilding teams is going to be wide receiver Rashee Rice. Obviously, he's been in the news quite a bit lately for all the wrong reasons. Most recently, he punched a photographer at a nightclub, which doesn't look good. And then back in April, we saw that he was driving 119 miles an hour before causing a 6-vehicle crash on a Dallas highway, which he then fled the scene. Him and his entourage did. So, by all accounts, we don't know what's going to happen. We're in a complete speculation mode. But I would say, and I'm no lawyer, but I would say from what I can tell, and if you don't follow Drew Davenport, he is a great follow. Highly, highly recommend him. But everything I can tell is you're looking at a floor at about 6 games. But let's say worst case scenario, he gets a year suspension. I don't think it's going to happen, but let's say worst case scenario he does. This is not a situation, in my view, unless he does something worse, because it seems like every month he's starting to do something else. He's going to be on the Chiefs. The Chiefs are not going to cut him. The Chiefs are going to keep him on the team. And then he's back with the squad next year. Let's not forget what Rashee Rice was able to do on the field, right? I can't speak to his off the field. We're talking about fantasy here. And from a fantasy perspective, he had 16 games. He had 102 targets, 79 catches, 938 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns. Travis Kelce isn't again any younger. I know he signed that extension. I don't think he's going to play all those years. We know that, Joe. They build in, some dummy years or just to kind of make it look a certain way, but I don't think he's going to play all that. So Chiefs are going to have to transition. They've got Xavier Worthy. I think Rashee Rice is going to be a staple in this team. So I think that he's going to stay with the Chiefs, and you're a rebuilding team. You can take the risk. I don't think it's going to be a Henry Ruggs situation. I don't think he's going to go to jail. So it's like, take advantage of this opportunity. There's a lot of ambiguity, surrounding Rashee Rice. What's going to happen with him? He was a great player, and from a football standpoint, I think he will continue to be. So as a rebuilding team, take the gamble and go ahead and trade for him, right? You've got guys like Devontae Adams. If you have a Devontae Adams on your team, could make a ton of sense. Adams doesn't have that much left. He's got a year or two, maybe, right? He's a great guy in my view. Try to see if you can't trade him, see if you could do something. Stephon Diggs is another one. Who knows what's going to happen with him? He's with the Houston Texans after that. He's a free agent. So there's a couple of names in my mind that I'd say, hey, swap them out. Take the gamble with Rashee Rice.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, I think it's going to be, it could be tough for a contending team. Say he does get the floor of 6 games, but there's a chance he gets even more than that. And you're talking about maybe missing half the season. Can a contending team really afford to have Rashee Rice on their roster? A guy that they're expecting to be in the starting lineup and a productive guy. Can they really wait, half the season for this guy to not just be involved at all? So I would definitely, you're talking about rebuilding here, take the gamble, bring on a talented guy like Rashee Rice, and, you can afford to wait out the suspension. And I think, it's got to mention productive players when they get in trouble, as long as you're productive and a good player, you tend to get the second chances. And, you got a good coach like Andy Reid who knows all about second chances. He's had his own family issues with the law. So I feel like he's a good coach to have in this situation, to be empathetic of what's going on and kind of, coach Rashee Rice through what he's going on. But somebody, please, in his inner circle, can we get this man out of Texas? Like literally nothing has gone good. Can we get this man out of Texas and back to Kansas City, with the team just to keep this guy out of trouble? It's been, absolutely disappointing to see a talented rookie like this get in this much trouble. And I think to your point, Steve, it's good to mention, I see people thinking Rashee Rice is going to get released by the Chiefs, comparing him to what happened with Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt's situation was completely different. You're talking about he, was at a bar, pushed a girl down, kicked her, broke some ribs, in a nose and had contusions. Way different situation as to why, Hunt got released by the Chiefs. And to me, Rice's incidents here aren't that severe. So I don't expect him to be released.
The only thing, and that's a great breakdown there, Joe. I agree wholeheartedly. I think the one trade that I would probably struggle with, and as a rebuilding team, I probably wouldn't recommend it, is if someone's saying, "Hey, and we're using the Draft Sharks trade chart here, looking at the values, to trade a guy, to trade like the 109 for him." I think I'd rather have the 109 at this point. I mean, I don't know that to me, I wouldn't want to trade rookie draft capital. Try to trade some of your veterans. See if you can't trade a guy like a Joe Mixon. See if you can't. You're going to have to package a few things if you're going to want to do a guy like Mixon. But I would try to do stuff like that. It's kind of some of the receivers that I talked about. I wouldn't try if you're rebuilding. Don't trade away your rookie draft capital. Try to trade some of these veterans. Even a guy like Herbert. Right. And if you're in a super flex league, that might be tough to do. But, there's a lot of, questions as to what's going on with Herbert. If you can't maybe get Rice and a high pick and see if you can't pick one of these quarterbacks, that might be worth it because it may take a while for your team to build. And I'm with you. Contending teams, they don't have the luxury just to sit back and relax. If you're in a competitive league, more than likely, you're not going to see repeat winners again and again and again. So I think it makes a lot of sense that they're going to have to make this type of move. They can't afford to wait for Rice to come back.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree, especially with how good this receiver draft class is. Don't be trading away, even if it's a late first rounder. There's plenty of wide receivers to be had who could have an impact similar to a Rashee Rice on your team, anyways. But if you're looking to tear things down, trade away some of your older veterans and, look to acquire, young talent like Rashee Rice that way.
All right, Joe. So who is your second rebuilding trade target?
Yeah, my second guy, I'm going to go to the wide receiver position, and that's Jameson Williams. And I know this is a guy that you were high on, Steve, when he was a rookie. Now it seems like you don't want anything to do with him. And all of a sudden, shifted confidence in me, even though I didn't like him coming out of college.
I know. You and I did a complete 180 on
yeah,
this.
We're doing a 180 here. But, let's face it. He's looking like the wide receiver 2 on this Lions team behind Amon-Ra St. Brown. They didn't bring back Josh Reynolds. He's now on the Broncos, clearing the pathway. But even saw towards the end of the last year, I feel like the Detroit Lions were looking to utilize this guy more. They got him utilized, gave him a few carries in the run game. He was able to get a rushing touchdown. He had, only 42 targets, 24 receptions, 354 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But I think that's why I'd like to acquire him now, is because I think there's more to come with Jameson Williams and the Lions pushing the ball down the field to him. And I think he potentially could take this next step in year 3 for him. We see some guys, it takes a few years to really get things under their belt. I think they're going to expand the playbook for him and continue to utilize him in the run game and just figure out how to get the ball in this guy's hands because he is explosive. He's had his troubles, it's dropping some passes. Hopefully he gets that cleaned up. And if he does, I think he's going to be a productive player, and buy him now before he does have this potential breakout year, and then you won't be able to have him.
Yeah, it's so interesting how you and I have done a complete 180 on him because he was my number 1 receiver in that class. And then all of a sudden I just kind of, I cut bait with him. I said, nah, it's not going to happen. You've obviously seen a lot of intrigue with him to go ahead and get him, but I'll give you this. His value's in the basement. So I think from a rebuilding standpoint, why not? I mean, the potential is there. I liked him for a reason. So I don't disagree with you. I mean, you're talking about values of Cortland Sutton, Keenan Allen, Jerry Jeudy, Christian Watson. Those are drops in a bucket. To me, absolutely, take a shot on Jameson Williams. These guys, sure, they could be okay, but they're not going to help you in a rebuild mode. These guys are going to be, I have much more confidence in Jameson Williams than I do Jerry Jeudy. So
Yeah.
I think that makes a ton of sense. And the thing that does give me a little hope is that they didn't refill the Josh Reynolds role. Josh Reynolds,
No, that's what I mean.
Jared Goff and him had some great familiarity together back in, with the Rams. Now he's no longer there. So they don't really have a third receiver. Now, obviously, Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Gibbs do get a lot of targets, but it doesn't mean you can't have a couple of Jameson Williams weeks. And the only thing is, if you're not in a best ball league, I think you could probably get a little frustrated because you may pick him on the weeks that he busts when he booms in other weeks. But I think in a rebuilding roster, it makes sense.
Yeah, because maybe, I mean, if he comes more polished as a receiver and a route runner and everything, maybe he doesn't just become that boomer bust guy down the road. But to your point, I mean, they got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Khalif Freeman, Donovan Peoples-Jones. He's not really competing with much outside of, like you said, Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's in a prime opportunity to be, have a nice productive season this year. Plus the continuity. Once again, Ben Johnson stays, Jared Goff still at quarterback, everything's staying the same for him. And I think he just continues to grow in the system.
Well, not to mention, would this be his first season to actually play the entire season if he doesn't get injured? Because he was recovering from the ACL the one season and then he had the suspension.
Yeah. So the only 6 games he missed this past year was the 6-game suspension that he had.
Yeah, so I mean, in my view, this is his first crack at actually being able to be part of a full training camp and a full season, which will help him because in both other seasons, those were cut short for those for those other reasons.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't even really thought about that.
So my last trade target for rebuilding teams is to go ahead and acquire quarterback Will Levis. I think Will Levis is a guy that many people are not that enthusiastic about. Obviously, he slid in the draft, was going to be a first-round pick, didn't end up being a second-rounder, went to the Titans. You had a 3-6 record with the Titans, about 58.4% completion percentage, 1,800 yards, 8 touchdowns, 4 picks. I mean, he didn't light the world on fire. I mean, he did have his first, his debut against the Falcons. Obviously, he had a really good game, had a couple deep balls with Hopkins. But what I like to see is they brought in an offensive coach in Callahan, and they've done a lot to support him. They've drafted some offensive linemen. They brought in Tyler Boyd now most recently, but also Calvin Ridley. They've got Hopkins. They've got Chika Okonkwo. They bring in Tony Pollard, have Tyjae Spears. I mean, this is probably the most amount of weapons that offense has had for quite some time. I mean, it was just a ground and pound game with Derrick Henry and Mike Vrabel for so many years. So, and Rand Carthan was the general manager when Will Levis was the pick. So I don't know how much influence Vrabel had on that, or was it more Carthan? So they're giving Levis a shot. So to me, as a rebuilding team, why not? He's got the infrastructure. He's shown you flashes. To me, I mean, why not kick the tires on him? Because he could pan out, and now you've got a guy for the next couple of years here. I mean, looking at the trade value chart, you're looking at guys like Jared Goff, who I know you're a big Jared Goff fan, Joe, but I mean, how much longer does Jared Goff have in relevance? I mean, he hasn't signed a contract extension yet with the Detroit Lions. So I think I don't know what his future holds. You even got guys like Deshaun Watson. I don't know if you could get it done, but if I'm a contending team, could you make the argument I'd rather have Watson over Levis? It's close. I think you could probably get a deal in place to be able to get Levis. So there are a couple of guys that I think I'd be kind of interested in to see, hey, could I possibly acquire Levis in a win now situation? Could you pair up an Aaron Rodgers plus maybe some other things in a package to get Will Levis? I think that would be worthwhile for a rebuilding roster.
Yeah, definitely. And like we mentioned before, I mean, if you got an older veteran quarterback like an Aaron Rodgers, absolutely try to trade him like you said, take the shot on Will Levis. Yeah, I'm not the big Will Levis guy. I'm sure there's a lot of people that feel similarly, but if you don't, let's face it, if you don't have a high pick in your rookie draft that you could potentially, get a Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams or maybe you want to take a flyer on Drake May. I mean, honestly, Drake May and Will Levis, you could probably flip a coin as who's going to pan out there. I think they're similar players who kind of, could be boom or bust in this league. But at least Levis, got his feet wet last year playing as a rookie. Believe he played in 9 games. And like you said, I mean, the Titans believe in this guy. They've surrounded him with talent, got an offensive coach now, which should help bring him along. And I think Titans are setting it up perfect for this situation. Like, if Will Levis doesn't perform this year, they've surrounded him with all these pieces. Then I think next year they're looking to draft somebody. But at least they're going to try to create the best situation for him, in year 2 and really see what he has.
The other piece I'm very interested in, and I have no way to verify this at all. I'm just throwing this out there. I've always been suspicious of Zach Taylor as a head coach. I've never personally thought he was all that good, but obviously the Bengals have had a lot of success under him. Are we going to see a similar situation with Shane Steichen when he left? When he left the Philadelphia Eagles and Sirianni was left alone to handle the team. You saw that Eagles team struggled. And it looked like that Steichen was actually the guy, the wizard behind it all. So now that this happens, that Callahan goes to Tennessee, do we see a similar situation where, Brian Callahan is actually the mastermind behind all of this? He goes over to Tennessee, does wonders with this Titans offense, and then the Bengals, who had a kind of a rough season last year, do they have an even more difficult season the following year? I don't know. I have no way to verify it, but it's going to be on my radar. I am very curious.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think we're really going to see, is it, Zach Taylor calling the shots there, or was it Callahan? I mean, because if all of a sudden, partly the offense struggled because Joe Burrow gets hurt, but Joe Burrow is able to stay healthy and play a full season this year, but the Bengals offense doesn't look like the Bengals offense, then you got to start questioning, was it Callahan all along? But Zach Taylor's just been kind of given the credit for his offensive creativity and making this thing hum. And then even last year, he gets all the credit for, handling the Jake Browning scenarios and the different quarterbacks they had to go through, once Joe Burrow did go down.
Right. So it's like, I don't know, but we saw what happened with Steichen. I thought I didn't like the hire at first. I thought that Sirianni was the mastermind, and lo and behold, it was opposite. Yeah. So it could be a similar situation.
Yeah. Like you said, I mean, it's definitely worth keeping an eye on because, like you said, if all of a sudden, if it really was Callahan making that Bengals offense hum, then and he got guys like Jake Browning to play well, then he should be able to get Will Levis, I'd imagine, to play well. With
definitely.
You mentioned
all those weapons
that he has now. I don't see why he couldn't get this thing humming with Will Levis.
So that was our 4 dynasty moves to make for rebuilding teams. Like I said earlier in the episode, if you haven't done so already, go ahead and check our previous video where we talked about dynasty moves to make for win now teams. Because, hey, maybe those players are on your roster and it will help you to be able to trade a win now player to get one of these rebuilding players. And then you used both these episodes to your advantage. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.